Hello everyone, Rob Guest from football.london here, and welcome to the latest episode of Golden Guest Talk Tottenham, sponsored by NordVPN. Joining me as ever, it's Alistair Gold. Ali, you well?
Yeah, I'm good actually. I'm all right, thank you, and I hope you are too. I got a little surprise for you to start the show off, which is of
Right.
absolutely no use to anyone, unfortunately, who's listening to the podcast. But I will describe it. But those who are watching it on YouTube are going to be able to see this, and this is going to sound very dodgy, actually. Just thinking about it, for the people that are listening, they're just going to hear a zip going down in front of the microphone. I'm going to something to show you, and it is my T-shirt. Which this is a bit of a private joke. I guess he is so disgusted. This is a bit of a private joke between Guesty and I. We were chatting last week about some famous kind of podcast journalists, whatever you have started kind of doing their own merch, and we were joking about the fact that we would never do that. We'd never do our own merch. And Guesty said something along the lines of, "I'd never want to see my face on a T-shirt." So what I went away and did was went to one of those like internet sites where you got create your own T-shirt. And as Guesty's face is now seeing, I've made a Golden Guest Talk Tottenham T-shirt just purely to wear for this. Hopefully, I think this is just this one-off podcast, because I am never walking out and about with my own face on a T-shirt ever. I must admit though, I told Lee about it and showed him a photo of it, and I do feel like a bit like Only Fools and Horses, Del Boy style. He may end up with like some kind of suitcase full of these shirts, trying to flog them down Tottenham High Road. Nobody's going to buy them. Nobody's going to buy them. And I must stress, before anyone sees this as a one-off image, this is not me plugging any merch or anything like that. We're not, as far as I'm aware, doing any Golden Guest Talk Tottenham merch. It is just something that just to show Guesty what his face would look like on a T-shirt. What do you think?
Not impressed at all. No.
My dog's on the floor, Indy. He just looked at me with the same look of disgust that you currently have on right now. Do you know what? It's actually a really nice fitting T-shirt. I think it's a good T-shirt. It's just a shame that it's got my stupid mug on it. But
I mean, you have some bad T-shirts, but I think that's like
that is
worse by far. And I mean, if Wilmer wants to flog him, he can put his own face on instead.
Should we get him on the back? Get Lee's face on the back.
Can have him on front. Honestly, if those see the light of day, he's going to get a big surprise.
It's quite a nice design. It's our original podcast, kind of the very one we've had from the start, really. But yes, I don't know why. When I see my face really kind of big on it, it looks like I'm really squinting. I think it was a photo when I was standing in front of the Statue of Liberty, and they've kind of chopped my head out of it. But yeah. So sorry for those listening on the podcast. It is, you might have to flip across and just have a little look on the YouTube channel to see what we're actually talking about. But I just knew what Guesty's reaction was going to be, so it only cost me like, I think it was about 12, 13 quid just to get it made up in a T-shirt place, just to show him. Because let's be honest, these podcasts and places that do it have like millions upon millions probably of listeners and stuff like that, and we have a very decent number, which we're very proud of, but we're not at that sort of levels to ever be a merch podcast. But yeah, just wanted to show you what Rob Guest on a T-shirt would look like.
Well, I mean, if you want to go ahead with them, by all means. You don't know about my image rights, so...
All right, Paulo Dybala, what is that all about? We're going to have to pay some complicated image rights fee to release your image to be put on any kind of T-shirt. Yeah, honestly, no one would ever want to buy these, but it's it just made me laugh. As soon as you said it, my brain instantly went into gear of I'm going to sort one of those out now. And yeah, I was wearing it around the house, and my wife was equally appalled at the prospect of me going around with my face. Can you imagine if I went outdoors accidentally? Oh, it'd be so embarrassing. It would be so embarrassing. But there you go.
Please put your jacket back on.
It's quite warm in here. I might leave it off just for this one episode and then maybe never wear it again.
Right, we'll move away from T-shirt nonsense. We'll speak about Spurs. You did a piece yesterday on Spurs scouting a couple of players in terms of strengthening defence. Head of next season, those two players are Hiroki Ito of Stuttgart and Murillo of Nottingham Forest. In terms of Ito, he's mainly been used as a centre-back at Stuttgart, but does have the capabilities to play as a left-back. I think he might have played about 15 games there or something last season. Murillo at Nottingham Forest, he joined Forest 1 year ago from Corinthians. Left-sided centre-back, 21 years of age. Probably Forest standout player last season. So, he might be a decent option for Spurs.
Yeah, I should stress these are kind of two of many that they've been looking at as well. I'm not saying that these guys are going to walk through the door like in the next day or two or anything like that. It was just mainly that kind of, you hear about these things and you're getting confirmed. They've definitely had a look at and scouted these players as their potential among the options for centre back. I definitely think centre back is going to be something they look at later in the window. Everything that we're kind of being told that it's not the priority, but it is an area that Postecoglou has publicly stated he would like another body within. And yeah, these are two very, very good options, to be honest, in different ways. Like you say, Murillo has been superb for Forest. In a tough season for Forest, he has been a real standout. He's got that kind of the skill on the ball that you'd like to see, I guess, from a Spurs centre-back in this system. I think I was looking back, he kind of, in his youth career back in Brazil, he started off as a striker, went back to being a midfielder, and then eventually ended up as a centre-back. So he's got that ability on the ball. I don't know if we're going with Ito or Ito. Hopefully people with far more knowledge of Japanese players will tell us exactly what... I'm going to go with Ito. But I'm sure people will then tell me it's Ito. But with Ito, he does have that versatility to be a very solid, decent left back as well, which you do wonder when Spurs are looking at their potential options, that would allow them probably then just to look for, we know that they're kind of having a look at fullbacks. That would allow them just to look at a right back if Emerson Royale is heading out the door, with AC Milan seemingly the most interested club in him. That allows you then probably not to have to worry about another left back, because you've got Destiny Doggy, you've got Van der Ven and Ito would both be able to play as left backs. And you've also, we don't know what's going to happen with Ben Davies yet. 12 months left on his contract, and potentially if he were to see that out, or maybe sign a new deal, you never know. I mean, he's Spurs' longest serving player now, and he was very helpful for them last season. But there would be then, I think, a fair bit of cover in the left back slots. Not perfect Postecoglou left back, inverted fullback kind of things, but certainly Ito seems to be very good on the ball, good passing range as well. Not really a renowned goal scorer or assist maker, but then he has mostly played at centre back, although he scored a lovely goal. I think it was his first goal this season for Stuttgart. So yeah, and he's also got apparently a release clause which is just under 30 million euros. So you're looking around the 25 million pound mark for him. So yeah, I think that's an area to look at later in the summer. But if you think about it, I mean, what you've got Eric Dyer's gone to Bayern. You've got Joe Rodon will be heading off this summer. We'll wait to see where he's going. I'm intrigued to see whether he ends up somewhere like Ipswich. I wonder that, because I know Kieran McKenna's quite a big fan of him. So I wonder whether, that would be an option for him. Obviously, Japhet Tanganga's headed off as well. Like I say, Ben Davies, we don't know what's going to happen last 12 months for his deal. Ashley Phillips, Alfie Dorrington, we don't really kind of know exactly what their next steps are going to be, and neither have made their debut for Spurs yet. So when you've only really then looking at Romero, Van der Ven and Dragoshin, you can kind of see, with all the games coming up, that probably is an area that's going to need another body. So, yeah, keep an eye on that kind of as the window goes on. But among the options, those two would both be very good. My only worry over Murillo would be that if Forest want to get a deal done before the financial fair play kind of deadline at the end of this month, whether that would come too soon for Spurs and someone else might nip in there, because I think quite a few clubs are looking at him. But then it depends whether someone else, Gibbs White has been linked with a lot of clubs, as he has with Spurs. Hudson Doy has been linked with Spurs as well, although Spurs have kind of stepped away and distanced themselves a little bit from that. But I'm sure there's a few other players, I guess, they could sell first if they needed to.
Yeah, I know you've mentioned, Spurs maybe look at defence last, but if Murillo's there for a good price, surely you'd be daft not to go for him if it's a reasonable fee and they can get him done before the end of the month. Because
Would it be high value though?
I don't actually know how much it'd be worth. Similar to Ito, maybe mid-20s, maybe a bit more.
He's 21. He's only 21, Murillo. I think I've got a feeling he would be upwards, maybe double that, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think it'd be
Mm.
a good player. I think he had a really good year at Forest, and it's usually tricky for the players coming in from another country. We've seen the vast amount of signings Forest have made over the past, 2 seasons, and how many of them haven't settled in. But Murillo, right from the word go, yeah, he played the game at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in start of April. I think it was, scored a no goal that day, but almost scored from 70 yards out when he saw
Yeah,
Vicario off his line.
yeah, I remember us talking about that.
Yeah, left-sided centre back, good on the ball. He can go forward with it as well. I think he'd be a good option. It just depends how much it'd cost. I know some have been saying maybe look at going for Jared Brandthwaite at Everton, but
What's his cost at the moment? That's about 70 something, wasn't it? He's been
oh, Brandthwaite would cost
yeah,
more than Richarlison costs Spurs. It would be a club record fee for
yeah.
Tottenham. And if that's someone who's not going to be guaranteed to play, who might be Van der Ven's understudy,
This is it.
potentially it's just a complete waste of money when you can use the money better elsewhere to strengthen positions. You know what needs to be done in terms of the attack and then midfield.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at
United been linked with Brandthwaite, haven't they? Mainly.
yeah, they have. But if you're looking, potentially a fourth choice centre back, Aita, 25 million maybe. But let's be honest, how many players go once the release clause is activated? You don't really see the release clause is activated. Clubs will try go in below that figure, really, and try and negotiate a lower price. But yeah,
True.
I think 2 decent options there.
Yeah, I think there's 2 sides to look at it. Is I know some people don't like the idea of it's a fourth choice left back. They would say we'll buy a top choice left back and then make them all fight it out, which is fair. But I think trying to convince a centre back to come is a different thing. Even for Dragishin, they kind of did well to get him over Bayern Munich, because that was a tough sell with Romero and Van der Ven so kind of entrenched as the central pairing. And I think to kind of have that and have Dragishin is going to be a tougher sell for somebody. Like if Murillo, let's say, has Spurs do go for him, but there's also a couple of the other top teams, it's going to be a tougher sell, I think. Whereas maybe for Anito, it's the move to the Premier League that maybe is the bigger pull for him. So yeah, we'll see. Like I say, I think the priorities very much are getting the attack and the midfield areas sorted out, and potentially a right back as well. And then you start to look towards that centre back position. It's like, I mean, you could argue, could you just not all do it all at one time? But just doesn't really work like that in the transfer market. You always look to get those priority ones sorted first. And also you've got to take into account what happens with outgoing players. Some players might not leave that you thought were going to leave. Some might unexpectedly you get a good offer in for as well. So the transfer market can kind of be turned on its head. Your best laid plans can suddenly have very different avenues come into them. So yeah, whatever the plan is, we know that, in his words, Postecoglou is really comfortable with it. So that may involve one of those centre backs. It may not.
Yeah, I suppose with Murillo as well, Tottenham already have a relationship with Nottingham Forest following that Brendan Johnson move, so that might make things a bit easier for them in terms of that one. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. Plenty of time left to go in the transfer window. In terms of an outgoing,
Hasn't even opened yet, technically.
No, and then it'll
What is it,
be
the
it's
14th?
August. Yeah, I think so.
14th,
Which
yeah.
is Friday, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Friday.
I love the fact that we're trying to add up there.
And then I think it shuts August the 31st or
Yeah.
30th
I
this
think it's a
time.
bit earlier. Yeah, is it maybe 30th? I did a piece yesterday. I should remember. Yeah, because it surprised me. It's because it's a Friday and you
Yeah.
can't shut it at the weekend. Yeah.
Yeah,
Normally
I think
they take it over to the Monday, but they haven't in this case.
because I think the international break starts on the Monday.
That'll be
So
why.
that'll be why. So I think it's going to be a very busy Friday
Yeah,
because there's Europa League draw that day as well.
might have to book a holiday.
Again.
again, says the man who's heading off on holiday soon.
Right. In terms of outgoings, then one of Tottenham's players looks like he might be heading out of the door. That is Tanguy and Ndombele. Over the weekend, Tottenham, there's been talks involving the player about a potential release from the last year of his contract. Quite an upsetting weekend for you then?
I was not expecting you to go in that way. No, I've made my peace with the Tanguy situation. I have. It's been long enough. I've had enough time to get used to the thought that he's probably not going to play for Spurs ever again. To be honest, we've kind of hinted it in a way, in the way we reported, and just said it's now become so difficult to get him out the door. Last year they had to resort to sending him to Turkey, and that didn't even work for him. He barely started any games. It's just, yeah, it's such a waste. It's such a waste of an amazing talent. But when you've had this many managers in a row that have struggled to get the best out of you, you can only surely look at yourself. That's the sad thing about it. I do wonder whether there was a sliding doors moment when, if Poch had stuck around back in 2019, could that have actually been a different Tanguy that we then saw? Because, he had that maybe way of working with players, and he'd wanted Tanguy. He'd wanted Frankie de Jong that year, Poch, but as soon as that deal was tied up with Barcelona, he very much set his sights on Tanguy as kind of a close alternative, is probably the way to put it. So he was very much a wanted man. And then every coach from then on has been a bit more like, okay, what we're going to do without Tanguy? It's going to be more that situation. To be fair to Jose Mourinho, got the best out of him. Probably the best period, maybe. Obviously, he played very well at Lyon, so maybe not the best period of his career, but certainly the best period of his career post in the last half decade, I suppose. I look back at that and how many games he started. Actually, I did a big piece on the summer of 2019 and how that kind of window's haunted Spurs for so many years. And Tanguy is the one that started the most games out of those four players signed that year in the Premier League. It's like 46, something like that.
What's Lo Celso on then?
Like 30 something.
Right.
Okay. And Cess was only about 24, 26, something like that. And obviously Jack Clark, 0. But yeah, Tanguy, I'm fascinated to see where his career goes next, because he will have more options as a free agent. Definitely, there will be clubs that think it's more. Let's take a punt on him. Every manager will have that ego thing about them that, well, I'll know what to do with him, and we can get him playing. We've got one of the best, biggest talents in the game. I would say, in terms of talent, I don't think you can deny that Tanguy has just got a ridiculous amount of it. Unfortunately, it's everything else that's required, the kind of consistency, the motivation, the mental application that's been needed. And this is unfortunately something that's been there since he was young. We've written the background pieces. We know that's what his former coaches have always said about him. So yeah, it's sad that it's come to this, but my goodness, you think about the money Spurs have wasted on him. The fee, I look back at the the press release that came from Lyon in my emails when the Spurs signed him, and it said it was around £60 million in total, plus the add-ons. That was what they had in their official press release. £60 million. Bearing in mind, you've got, well, they'll be paying him up, you'd imagine, most of his final year. So you've got 5 years of being one of the highest earners at Spurs as well. So half a decade of wages, which I don't know whether we're talking 200 grand a week, whatever it might be. You're looking at, it's just ridiculous what they must have spent on this one player who has started 40-something Premier League games for them in half a decade. It's obscene. It has to go down as, it's a question for you, worst signing in Tottenham's history?
I think so, in terms of the money involved. Yeah. I think it has to be. I can't think of anything else what comes near to it. And the worst thing about it is he's such a talented player. There was a bit of a showreel of, some of his best ball work, skills in the Tottenham shirt when he's got players around him and he's just beating them with ease. And it's like, why weren't we seeing this week in, week out? And, his stock's so low at the moment, and it shouldn't be, because he's got all the attributes to be a really, really good player, but just not being able to get out of him. Mm-hmm. And you can remember that goal at Sheffield United, the chip over, I think it was probably Ramsdale in that. That was,
it might have been.
Yeah, really good. Scored on his debut against Villa at home. And you were thinking he's just going to kick on from here, and it's just not been the case. And Antonio Conte, Jose Mourinho, some of the best managers in the world over the past few decades haven't been able to get it out of him. And even like you were thinking the move to Lyon for 6 months would probably, help getting back to his best. But that was,
he had that loan as well. Yeah, he did. He's had 3, hasn't he?
yeah, that was so underwhelming. And they had the option as well to buy him. And I think that was just quite an easy decision for them in the end. Napoli, it just never got going for him. Extremely bit part role in their Scudetto win. And the same for Galatasaray when they won the Turkish league. I think I worked it out in terms of his minutes per league appearance. It might have been about 50 minutes per appearance. It works out in the league.
Minutes per piece of silverware must be pretty decent.
Yeah, well, I think someone's mentioned that he's had more trophy wins than Tottenham appearances in like the last 2.5 years, or Tottenham starts. It's 3 trophies compared to 2.
So bad.
Starts, yeah.
That is, I guess he's kind of a lucky charm. Maybe some clubs will look at him in that way as well. I mean, he's only, was he 27?
Yeah.
He's still got kind of, as a midfielder, he's still got a long time left. I should have seen the warning signs. I was thinking back. So did his first interview with a couple other journalists in Singapore with Musa Sissoko translating for us back in 2019. He looked knackered already. And I kind of said to him, pre-season, it's tough under Poch, isn't it? And he was like, oh, it's so hard. Kind of, you could see he was absolutely done. And then Dave Heitner from The Guardian and I did a sit-down interview with him a couple of years later. It was during the Mourinho era. And he admitted then, I asked him, I kind of referred back to that time. And he admitted then, and I told my mates about 3 weeks in I wanted to leave Spurs. And it was like, what? What have you just said? And he just and he's a great character. He was a really fascinating guy to interview. He's obviously got a lot of kind of confidence in his own ability. And obviously we had that moment with Mourinho, like knocking on his door and all this sort of getting him out training when he maybe probably shouldn't have. And there's been so much kind of drama around him. The walking off the pitch was against Morecambe, the slow walk, and the fans turned against him. He's managed to fit more controversy and silverware into his 5 years than, like you say, appearances. It's crazy. But yeah, I suppose the deal Spurs now do with him, you'd imagine they'll get a bit more money back. They will save some money because I'm sure they'll think, part of the negotiations, they'll say, well, if you're a free agent, you've got more chance of move, more chance of a signing on fee as well, which is going to make up anything you'll miss from us. And I'm sure there'll be some kind of way around that. But what a kind of admitting that you made a huge, huge mistake when 4 years on. You've released 2. That would be 2 of the players from that window released this year as well with Cess.
Yeah, it will be. And it'll be the 3rd player Tottenham have mutually terminated the contract after Serge Aurier. Yeah. Matt Doherty as well, but I mean that was just a complete mess.
That was a disaster class in how to do a loan move. That was.
Yeah, and Ndombele, really going to be interesting to see where he goes next, what the options are for him. It's like I said, his stock's so low when it shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I mean Lo Celso looks like he's going to head off this summer as well. So you look at that window that I totaled it up. I think it cost them more than 150 million, that window, after having not spent anything in the previous 2 windows, it should be said. But 150 million pound window, and let's say Jack Carter got a sell-on fee, so they sell-on clause, so they could eventually get a little bit for him. But Lo Celso, probably with a year left in his contract, 15? And if you get 20, you're pushing it. If he has an amazing Copa America, you never know. But I mean, even 20 million pounds back from a 150 million pound window, not including the wages, which I don't know, what would that be? Maybe another 50, 100 million on top of that? I don't know. Over the last 4 years, it's just obscene, utter waste of a career and a transfer as well.
Yep. Before we move on to some other subjects regarding Spurs, I think it's time to let everyone know about the benefits of using NordVPN.
Yes.
Go on, Ali.
I will, yes. You caught me unawares there. I wasn't expecting it this early in the show, but I'm ready to talk about Nord. And funnily enough, you should say that because some of the journalists that are, I know that are kind of heading off this summer in various either club tours or they're going to international tournaments like the Euros have actually been asking me about NordVPN because they've been wanting to do exactly what we always talk about with them, and that's being able to watch stuff from back home when they're away abroad, and also just access various things while making the device think it's back home. So I have been also extolling the virtues of NordVPN privately as well as publicly, like we do in this podcast. And yeah, I just thought that was quite cool as a little aside. But as we always say, NordVPN is the fastest VPN in the world. That means there's no buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the globe without your bandwidth throttling. Something I've done so many times over the years, so many times, and I will be doing it again this summer. Covering Spurs tour in Japan and Korea, I will be using it on that as well. And not only that, but the outlay on a NordVPN subscription is cheaper for you in the long run, and that's because you can purchase, let's say, streaming services or bookings from other countries at a much cheaper rate. So, for example, let's say you could be wanting to fly to another country, you could book the flight from your destination country rather than booking it from the UK. Just make your device think it's in the destination country, and you could end up getting a cheaper deal out of it as well. It's also very good for security and locking down your devices to a degree if you're using public Wi-Fi. So it means you're paying out for Nord, but you're actually saving money overall. There's a whole host of other benefits that I haven't even gone into from signing up to NordVPN. So why not take a look and give it a go? To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and you'll help support our podcast every time you head to that link and subscribe to the service. The link, if you just missed it, is in the episode description box.
Yeah, we'll talk about another incoming now at Tottenham Hotspur, and that involves Jack Chapman from Southampton. He's coming in to help in regards to Spurs' academy. Perhaps not the biggest move of the transfer window, but it's one that could certainly help the club in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really interesting. Kind of that one. That's one that's those kind of things kind of creep up on you slightly. Those kind of stories, and it's kind of more known within the academy world. And it came out in the last couple of days. You might remember at the press conference, I think it was back in February, when I asked Ange about from the outside, seemed like quite a few youngsters coming through that were quite exciting. And he was obviously using a few on his bench, and he had Jamie Donnelly getting minutes here and there, and Mikey Moore obviously later would do the same. So I kind of asked him about the amount of quality coming through, and he absolutely went off in the opposite direction and said there isn't enough. There needs to be a better production line coming through. And he was very kind of went in a different direction, which was great. That's fine. I'm not looking for him to kind of agree with me. I'm looking to get the most interesting answer out of him. And he did that. And also Simon Davies, the academy director, did a really interesting podcast, the club one, Off the Shelf podcast, which really, he went down a similar kind of line, saying it needs to be so much better. And that's what he's been doing the last year or so after he became the academy head. And part of that is bringing in Jack Chapman as the it will be similar to his head of youth recruitment role that he had at Southampton. He was only there, or he's only been there for about 11 months. So Spurs have moved quite quickly there. He was at Swansea for about 6-7 years. Last 4 of those as their head of youth recruitment. So he kind of looks at youth recruitment at like 16 and below age range, and kind of speaking to people involved at Spurs and people who deal with Spurs and their youth section as well from outside. And there is this kind of common theme that Spurs have got some quite decent talents at 16 and above, but what's coming next is the bit maybe they're a little bit concerned about, which is why you're often seeing them try to supplement that with people from the outside. And that is going to be Jack Chapman's job, is making sure that those age groups, it sounds ridiculous to say it, like the 9 to 16-year-olds, and it's just mad that we're talking about like a football business and you're talking about 9-year-olds and stuff like that. But that's where he was very highly regarded at Swansea at doing that, and that's why Southampton obviously have got a great history of bringing through young players as well, why they identified him as a person to do that with them, and why Spurs have quickly kind of nipped in there as part of Simon Davies' kind of overhaul of the academy. And he'll come in later this summer. He'll work with Simon Davies, but also Johan Langer and the first team kind of recruitment side of things in terms of creating, I guess, a pattern and a pathway for all of these young players that will come through. But yeah, he takes over. I think it was Paul Rowe that was there before him. He'd been there, I think, a fair while as well, maybe similar, like 6-7 years, like Chapman was at Swansea. And yeah, he had quite a kind of a past to his. I'm trying to, I think I've written it down some notes here, but he'd been at various places like Liverpool and Palace and Leicester and places like that before Paul Rowe and he Paul Lowe, call him Paul Lowe. Yes, he was 7 years at Spurs, Liverpool, Norwich, Palace, and Leicester. He'd been at before that, but he left in April, so this is essentially the replacement for Paul Lowe. And yeah, we'll see what happens. It's quite a kind of a busy little setup down there as well, in terms of all the people involved, because you've got him, you've got Simon Davies as well. You've also got Andy Scolding, who's in there. He was brought from Rangers a couple of years back. He started off in a role that was called Head of Football Strategy, but I know now that his role is Head of Loans and Pathways. So from what I understand, he goes out and kind of keeps a check on the loan players that are out there, the young ones. There's been quite a few times that I know that some of those young players, he's been there watching them in the stands. But he also is responsible in part for recruitment of that 16 to 21 age group as well, which is, he was in charge of recruitment back at Rangers as well. So yeah, there's quite a few of them kind of working in that regard. And obviously you've also got Johan Langer, Rob McKenzie as well, the chief scout. So they're improving that area, and that's what they've got to do, because we want that production line into the first team, and then Postecoglou then seeing a certain quality of player that he wants to give a chance, because it kind of looks like at the moment, from everything I'm hearing, that probably Tyrese Hall and Mikey Moore are the two that Postecoglou will look at next season. You'd imagine the likes of Jamie Donnelly probably go out and get a loan and really improve their first team experience. That's mainly because of the huge number of number 8s that I think we'll probably talk about in a moment as well. But yeah, it's an exciting addition for the academy. It's for those who only follow the first team, you're not going to probably notice much for a good half a decade or so, maybe or less. But for the future, it should be quite exciting.
Yeah, in terms of the players currently in the academy, there might be a chance for them to go out and learn next season, with Chris Davies recently becoming Birmingham City manager. Davies, key part of Ange Postecoglou's coaching staff last season. It did look at one stage that he could be heading for Swansea City during the season, but that move to Wales never came to fruition. But Davies has got his first managerial job now at Birmingham City. Going to be quite a tough gig, that. Birmingham now in League One following their relegation. I mean, they went through a host of managers last season. Yeah. Started off with John Eustace, Wayne Rooney's time at St Andrews. The struggles well documented. Tony Mowbray then went in. He had to, step aside because he was ill. Gary Rowett was the one who took them down in the end. So now they've gone down a different route. Chris Davies, extremely highly rated in the game. He'll be looking to bring Birmingham back to the Championship at the first time of asking. Really well supported club there. There's going to be a lot of pressure on his shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. He's very highly rated. I was thinking there's so many Davies or Davis, depending on how you say it at the Spurs, isn't it? We've just been talking about Simon Davies and Ben Davies in the team. Chris Davies is now left. There was another Simon Davies, of course, used to play for them too. I'm surprised I haven't said every single one the wrong way around so far. But yeah, Chris Davies, he's a loss to Spurs. He is a very talented young coach, 39 years old. A lot of experience for someone that age, because he started mid-20s as a coach. Obviously, Brendan Rodgers, I was going to say Brendan Johnson. Brendan Rodgers, he spent most of his career beforehand, other than a spell at Reading with. And yeah, I mean, according to their own kind of numbers, Birmingham apparently looked at close to 1,000 coaches and evaluated them, spoke to more than 40, either directly or through their representatives, before deciding on Chris Davies, which is it's like being on The Apprentice or something. That's a hell of a kind of a process. And it is a tough gig. It is a club that really should never be in League One. That's absolute. And we were talking about this earlier. They play in front of 20,000 fans each week. They're going to be doing in League One. They're going to be a huge club in that league, and it is going to be pressure on him. And there's obviously the Tom Brady, NFL legend, is involved there as like a co-owner. There's a lot of kind of spotlight on that club right now. But he's got everything about him, I think, to be a success. Was very well liked within Spurs, very highly rated, good communicator, innovative coach. Really, fun enough, having spoken about the young players, very much a key component in the link to the academy. He was always very interested to see how the young players were doing and then helping work with them when they came into the first team setup, which is why you're absolutely right. If Spurs were looking at a loan club, it's a great shout for a loan club, really. And when we talk about players like Jamie Donnelly needing first team football, I would imagine there's going to be interest in him at maybe championship level. But I think there's a few players there that maybe who would target championship level. You'd think, well, maybe you go to League One, but be at a club like Birmingham, be up the top of the division, hopefully, playing in front of big crowds, lots of pressure. You may get as useful an experience as you would at a championship club and maybe struggling a little bit, perhaps. I don't know, or that club may be struggling. But yeah, I think everyone at the club is happy for him. It is a loss, but I think we're all quite happy for him. Postecoglou certainly likes to develop his coaches, so he's always proud. And he did turn down Swansea, from what I was aware earlier in the season, in order to stay at Spurs and see out the season. And now I guess it's who comes in to replace him. Who do you reckon it might be? What do you think he'll do? He's got three options, really, hasn't he? Brand new coach, one that he's worked with before, or an internal appointment.
Brand new coach, I'd go for. He always is on about giving people chances. Someone new with different ideas to learn off. I think that might be it. And Tottenham certainly could do with someone who's good on the set pieces as well. Gonna be interesting. Like you said, 3 different avenues you can go down. Plenty of examples where it has given someone new a chance in the past. That might be the case.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because there were a lot of links with him with previous coaches last summer, and that's not something he's really ever done. It was strange to see. Was it John Kennedy, Gavin Strachan,
Harry Kewell as well.
There was a chap that he worked with in Japan who's now the FC. Peter Klimowski. He's now the FC Tokyo boss. So he has been linked with them. But then he also, do you remember he was quite heavily linked with Paul Clement as well, wasn't he? It was another one, not a previous coach, but a new kind of experienced coach. I do think there are a good couple of internal candidates. Matt Wells is a very, very highly rated coach who's been an assistant manager before. There's him. Obviously, Ryan Mason has done his 2 caretaker spells as well. There's a number of kind of options out there for him. I'm intrigued to see which way he goes with it, and whether he goes with an experienced manager or a assistant head coach. There's different kind of ways for him to go. Maybe some more from fresh blood. Whether it ends up being as a coach or the assistant head coach, we'll see. But I don't think there's any bad thing to that, having another voice in the mix as well. But as in terms of loan players, which kind of leads me on to the point I was going to make earlier about the number 8s. Do you think Spurs are going to have to loan out some players who were playing the number 8 role purely because the sheer volume of players suddenly from this summer they'll have in that position?
Yeah, I think one certainty has got to be Alfie Devine. He was really good at Port Vale in the first half of last season. Spurs obviously saw an opportunity for him to go to Plymouth, test himself at a higher division. Didn't quite work as well as maybe Spurs envisaged. Started in the team, found himself out of the team, but then on the final day of the season was back in the starting 11 and played a key role in helping Plymouth stay up. I think Plymouth Live have reported it was last month they're actually keen on Alfie Devine and Ashley Phillips going back. So there might be an opportunity there for them. But Wayne Rooney's in charge now. He might have different ideas. So that thinking could have potentially changed. But I think, Devine will be one of those who needs a move because, like you said, there's just so many players in terms of who can play in that number 8 role. And he needs more experience. I think, do you keep him in the Championship for another year? If he's already been there, surely. Surely you do.
So. Yeah, I think so. There are just so many. I think I've written down the sheer volume of people they have at number 8. So senior squad alone that can play in the number 8 role. And yes, I know Postecoglou doesn't like us to delineate between the 8 and the 6, even though they clearly are different roles. Maddison, Sarr, Bentancur, Kulusevski, Lo Celso, and Akeji Højbjerg Skip would all play the number 8 role last season. They've been linked with Conor Gallagher, who can play the number 8 role, also number 6 maybe as well. Eze, who can play the number 8 role, can also play more as a number 10 and as a wide man as well. This is the issue kind of more in the Postecoglou system. The number 10 doesn't really exist as much. It's kind of a bit of a hybrid with the 8 role. Then you've got, like I said, Tyrese Hall. Tyrese Hall, you would think you don't loan out this season. He's probably going to be involved and involved in the Europa League squad as well. I mean, he's only just had his first half season, the under-21s, Tyrese. So I'd imagine a season spent between a full season with them, but also doing a lot of first-team stuff and Europa League minutes as well. So you've got him, Jamie Donnelly, who I mentioned, Alfie Devine, who you've spoken about. Technically, Mikey Moore can play as a number 8 as well. You know, he does mainly play further up the pitch, also out wide, but he can do a number 8 role, and he's only 16 years old. But there's so certain young Swede who's coming in this summer, and Lucas Bergvall. It's amazing. This kind of really suddenly it's gone from who plays there, we're going to have to shove Kulusevski there because no one else can play there, to actually two big transfer links with players that can play that role, but also loads of talented young players. And I would hate for them to kind of anyone's path to be blocked. Look, I know we all want transfers, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't sign Gallagher or Eze because of that, but it's just you've always got to be aware of the knock-on effect for someone like Bergvall, who's coming in, and I know he's got to adapt, but although thinking about it, I suppose the other expression is always the cream rises to the top, doesn't it? So maybe the competition is good for all of them, but I've seen so many obvious kind of examples of young players that had to leave because they didn't get their opportunity, and maybe that's where the loan system will help Spurs, and maybe, like we said, a couple heading to Birmingham.
Yeah, I think one I mentioned, or maybe in terms of heading to Birmingham, Dane Scarlett. I think that might be a wise one. I think with Dane, it's a tough call because he did okay at Portsmouth, found himself out of the team there in the second part of the campaign when John Massinio came in as head coach. Went to Ipswich, 12 substitute appearances. So it's a question of, do you keep him in the Championship or do you send him to the top half of League One? Now, Birmingham will be expected to challenge at the top of the league. So is that going to be a good opportunity there for Dane to add goals to his game? Maybe. But I think, as you were saying to me before we went on the show, does Ange keep him for the first part of the season? Because there could be opportunities from there in the Europa League. And he's also homegrown.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I have no, I'm not going to be involved in the inner workings of what happens with Tottenham or Dane Scarlett. But personally, if it was my decision, I would probably say, looking at the fact that Troy Parrott is probably going to head out this summer, maybe permanently, I would imagine that you then take Dane as a club-trained player. Technically, I think he'd be on the B list anyway, so you wouldn't even need to put him in the other club-trained bit. But get him some kind of minutes in the Europa League, start to increase his first team playing time. You know, they're looking for another striker to come in as well. So then maybe if you think, okay, well, in the Premier League, you're not getting enough time, and then come, end of January, and it's looking like there's less minutes for him there, then maybe that's when it's a difficult one. You'd maybe with that experience, extra experience he will then have, then a move back to the Championship will be ready for him, or will be the right time for him. But it's a big shout in what you do with these players, and the balance between giving them some first team experience or not, or getting the kind of more regular first team experience that comes with a loan move as well. But it's a difficult one, because the other problem with Europa League is that you've got one side where you'd like to see young players given a chance, But then the other side of that coin is quite a lot of people would still want Spurs to play a very strong team to make sure that it's a trophy that they could win and not to jeopardise that in any way, shape, or form. So Postecoglou's kind of got to navigate a balance between all of that, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of young players that will be wondering, I think, what next season holds for them.
Yeah, because Dane did get that opportunity in the Conference League a couple of times on the Nuno.
Isn't he the youngest player to have got an assist in the competition since Kylian Mbappe against Tottenham Hotspur?
Right, interesting.
At that point, I don't know whether that's been surpassed since, but I remember that being the stat at the time.
Yeah, because I can remember being in Arnhem and watching him start, and it was just, obvious that he needed a bit more experience under his belt. It'd have been, 17 maybe at the time, starting against the experienced centre-backs. It was, something that didn't really pan out as expected. But yeah, I think there's going to be opportunities there at Birmingham. I think it'd be perfect for Matthew Craig.
Yes.
He was so good at Doncaster and rave reviews, played a key role in them, coming from absolutely nowhere in about January, February time to make it into the playoffs. Unfortunately, lost in the semi-finals against Crewe.
Didn't they win like 9 or 10 in a row or something, didn't they?
Yeah, I think it was probably more than that, maybe 11 or 12. I can't remember the exact number, but for Matthew Craig, the next natural step is move up to the next division, to League One. So could be an opportunity there for him there, because Chris Davies will know what he can offer.
Yeah, it's a great shout. I've put an article that I think has gone out while we're recording this podcast about potential players that could go there, and I did have Matthew Craig there because he had a splendid loan, a really, really important loan for him. And don't forget, Matthew Craig's made his Premier League debut for Tottenham. He has, with George Abbott end of last year. So yeah, no, I think there's a lot of opportunities there. Obviously, it is also down to Chris Davies. We can't say, "Oi, take these lot," kind of thing. He's going to be under a lot of pressure to win, but he will also know that there's some real kind of stars in the making there. That if he can grab the opportunity to take a couple of them with him, then why not?
Yeah, there's no games for Spurs at the moment because it's the off-season. Spurs will discover their Premier League schedule next week when it's announced, 9 a.m, Tuesday, June the 18th. But we've got the Euros starting, the Copa America starts a week on Thursday. It's quite an important time for Spurs because these two tournaments could possibly lead to future moves for a couple of the players.
Yeah, it kind of works both ways for Spurs, doesn't it? It's like, I think it will hold up some of the deals that they might want to try and do with players at these tournaments, but also it could benefit them in terms of bumping up the value a little bit for, we're looking at Højbjerg and Lo Celso. They're the two really. I don't think anyone else involved Spurs would want to let go. So yeah, very much Højbjerg and Lo Celso. Højbjerg always seems to do pretty well at tournaments as well. And Lo Celso will be looking to make up for kind of it'd be still so gutted about the World Cup, having been kind of ready to go there. He would have started probably almost every game there as well for them, and then picked up, was it hamstring injury? I think it was, wasn't it, at the time?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, which meant that, he wasn't able to be a part of what would end up being a World Cup winning campaign, although you never know. Would they have still won it with him? Would that have changed anything about it? It's not to say that he's like awful and he would have stopped them, but the butterfly effect of things like that. But yeah, he'll be looking to make up for lost time with that. They won the Copa America as well, didn't they, last time?
They did. The previous year, Hila played a part in that as well.
So so this is kind of looking for him and Romero to retain that. Did you see Romero's assist the other day in the warm-up game against Ecuador?
I've not, but I've heard about it. Pretty good.
Very nice. Yeah, it's very. I wasn't sure whether he was offside in the build-up, but presumably they must have looked at it and he wasn't. But it's a classic one that you and I on the sidelines would be going, "Oh, look at Romero! Look what he's gone!" And he's like on a rampaging kind of run up the pitch, stays up there. He's picked out with a really fast, quick ball. He does this lovely turn inside the defender and just lays the perfect weighted pass into Di Maria's run, and he just slots it home. It's it's something that like Maddison would be proud of in the Spurs team, and it's come from the Spurs' centre back. So yeah, I hope he has a big tournament as well, because we kind of want him to be satisfied and not desperate to then go and play at the Olympics and cause any kind of kerfuffle over all that sort of. I haven't used the word kerfuffle in a long time. Yeah, and as Postecoglou says, he wants him to be part of a big season for Spurs coming up. But Lo Celso and Højbjerg, yeah, let's if they don't get something done beforehand, I'm sure Spurs would probably, in an ideal world, want to get deals for them done before. Been a lot of links with both of them, mainly Betis with Lo Celso, but also Højbjerg has been linked kind of here, there, and everywhere, with not so much Napoli, which I thought they would with Conte going in there, but interestingly Fenerbahce with Jose Mourinho there. Can you see him going to Fenerbahce?
I think he'll have better options. And let's be honest, if you go to the Turkish league, are you going to get a decent move after that? Potentially.
Sometimes players do.
I think if the offer
no, from Tanguy, I guess.
Yeah, I think if the offer to go to Napoli's there, you probably take it. But I think they'll have plenty of other options. Then Atletico Madrid have been linked with him again. What'll be?
I think Juventus have looked at him, and maybe even Bayern have looked at him as well, haven't they, in the past? Bringing him back.
He certainly won't be short of options. And as you say, he always seems to do well for Denmark in the tournaments. I think he got 3 assists at Euro 2020. Denmark have had a couple of warm-up games already. He scored in both. He scored in their previous game as well. So he's on the run of 3 games, 3 goals. He'll be a pivotal figure for Denmark, who are coming up against England again in the Euros. So, yeah, a chance for him to put himself firmly in the shop window for a move away from Spurs, which you would imagine will happen sooner rather than later.
He's such a funny player in terms of, you think in his ideal world, he's this kind of midfield general that would like sit in front of the defence. But actually, he kind of was an attacking midfielder, wasn't he, early in his career? And you can see that he actually can be really effective in the final third. But it's just a part of his game that he's never kind of at club level, let's say, really pushed on with. But when he plays for his country, whether they just get him into more situations like that, perhaps, he does rack up the goals and assists for them. But yeah, I mean, he will be another club's player, I'd imagine, by the end of this window. Same with Lo Celso, and that is why you're seeing all these midfield links, and that's why it's a priority area for Spurs.
Yeah. Right, I think we'll call it a day for today's latest episode of Golden Guest Talk. Tottenham, you'll be back later in the week with Wilma. I assume Wilma will be on that T-shirt, not me.
I'm imagining this is. I might wheel it out once in a blue moon just to wind you up, because essentially you're doing then a podcast looking at your own face. But then kind of the downside is that I'm also doing that because I can see myself on our little screen when we record it. So yeah, I might just get one purely with Lee's face on it. just one, just to kind of throw him off when he starts. And I'm going to get so many people saying, "I know that they just gold wearing his T-shirt with his own face on it. He loves himself." It's like, it really wasn't that. It was just to get the look that I got off Guesty at the start, which was priceless. And I wish I'd taken a photo. Technically, I could take a screenshot off of YouTube.
You could.
But yes, no merch that I'm aware of. Just me going on a website, and I'm really do apologize to those listening on the podcast, because it would have made horrendous listening at the start of this podcast of something that is a visual joke, something that also was a private joke, which is not always the greatest start for a podcast either to the public. But hopefully, if you switch across to the YouTube, you'll have a little look and see what it all made. Might make some sense.
Yeah, so you'll be back later in the week. In the meantime, as ever, just keep with us at football.london for all your latest Tottenham news. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and you'll help support our podcast. The link is in the episode description box.